Welcome to the Quit by Healing podcast. In today's episode, I'm going to talk specifically about how to go through this project of overcoming porn addiction when you're in a relationship. So you have a partner, you have a girlfriend or a wife, and in that context, what do you need to know about how to overcome porn addiction? So far in my content, I have mostly addressed single men who want to overcome porn addiction. But of course, worldwide, there are millions, probably hundreds of millions of men in relationships who are porn addicts. And I've got good news and bad news. Some aspects of overcoming porn addiction are easier when you're in a relationship, and some aspects are especially challenging. Some are more difficult. You have to navigate some tricky waters here. But in this episode, we'll look exactly at what those differences are, and I'll give you my recommendations of how to do this. So today we'll cover many topics, including whether or not you can have sex while you're going through withdrawals from porn addiction, how to communicate with your partner in order to make this whole thing easier for both of you, the specific things you can do during this process to create a stronger, better relationship and create a much better sex life for yourself once you get back to having sex, and what kind of a timeline you can expect as you get through this process. Now, a few quick disclaimers to get out of the way. First of all, I'm going to be talking from the perspective of a heterosexual guy in a relationship, so you're a guy with a girlfriend or a wife, and that is simply because, first of all, that's the vast majority of my audience, but also that is the only perspective where I can share my own experience. I'm sure that many of the things I talk about here also apply to other relationship configurations, but I'm just going to use the frame of you're a man, you have a girlfriend or wife, and if you're in a different situation, it should be easy enough for you to translate that into whatever applies to you. Also, I am not going to reiterate the entire process and all the strategies and tools and so on, because a lot of the process is exactly the same, no matter whether you're single or not. So if this is the first of my videos you see or the first podcast episode that you listen to, make sure you refer to my other content. I will also leave in the video description, in the podcast description, I will leave some links to resources. So if you don't know any of the other stuff that I've explained and shared, you can go there for context, because if I basically try to explain everything from the ground up, it would take too long. So I'm going to focus specifically on the things that are different for people in relationships. So let's get straight into it, and let's start with the first and most obvious challenge, which is abstinence. As a porn addict, you are sexually overstimulated. This is a bit of a simplification, but in simple terms, you are overstimulating yourself sexually. And many of the negative side effects or the negative consequences that come from porn addiction are because of this overstimulation. Because of that, we need to remove that stimulation in order for your brain to be able to heal. So obviously, you can't overcome porn addiction while watching porn, but here we have to make a distinction between pornography, masturbation, and sex, because they're related, but they're certainly not the same. So pornography is a hyperstimulus. It is bad for your dopamine system. It is bad for your mindset and your mental health. It is socially disconnecting. It has 100 negative side effects. There's absolutely nothing good about it, so obviously we need to cut out porn. Masturbation, if it's done without pornography, is much less problematic, but a porn addict will typically fantasize about porn stuff while masturbating, and so essentially hold on to the problem. And this is why generally it's better to also cut out masturbation. But what about sex? Well, sex, especially in the context of a relationship, sex with a partner where there's real human connection there, is not only not bad for you, it's good for you. So wouldn't it be nice if you could quit porn and just continue having sex? Unfortunately, it's not that simple. Which means that yes, as part of overcoming porn addiction, you will have to abstain from all things sexual, including from sex, at least for a while. And that's because your porn addiction has already infected and affected your sex life, probably in more ways than one. Here are some typical things that porn addicts experience in their sex life. Difficulties with real sex. So this could be boner problems, essentially. You have trouble getting hard or staying hard while you're trying to have sex with your partner. And this can also be, you might still be having sex, but I wonder how many guys are out there who are thinking, oh, I don't get the kind of erection I used to get, but it's probably just because of my age. It's not because of your age, it's because of porn. Difficulties either reaching orgasm, so it's like you can't finish, or premature ejaculation. And yes, both of those can be caused by porn. Another really common one is fantasizing about porn. So you're having sex with your partner, but in order to finish, you have to kind of close your eyes and imagine some hectic porn stuff Otherwise, you can't finish, which is kind of crazy. But like I said, this is very, very common. Difficulties or even a complete inability to enjoy vanilla sex, so, quote unquote, normal lovemaking. Let me be clear, there's absolutely nothing wrong with being adventurous and playful with your sex life. And in fact, I'll get back to that a bit later. But if you're in a situation where you absolutely have to bring out the costumes and the whips and the toys and do fetish stuff, otherwise you just can't get sexual pleasure, that's a problem. So you can't just make love to your girlfriend or wife anymore. That just doesn't do it for you anymore. That's a porn problem. Hypersexualization, which is when you constantly want and need sex from your partner to the degree where she feels like she's nothing but a sex object to you, and where the sexual aspect of your relationship seems to be pushing all other aspects away. That is also a porn problem. And finally, there's the dead bedroom. It's when you're in a relationship but you're not having sex anymore at all. You basically only masturbate to porn. That's how you get sexual pleasure. You don't have any sex at all, or maybe you have sex but pretty rarely and it kind of feels like a chore to you. So these are some examples of how porn addiction affects your real sex life. And all of this basically means one thing. When you are in the middle of your porn addiction or in the withdrawal process, you can't have sex without it triggering a whole bunch of porn problems. You have to give yourself and give your brain a break from all of this and let the porn brain calm down and let that porn addiction fade into the background before you can reintroduce sex in a way that doesn't bring back all of those old problems. And exactly how to do that is what we'll discuss in the rest of this podcast episode. So what does this look like in practice? So my advice for single guys is always that, first of all, prioritize being porn-free first and foremost. And ideally, the ideal case would be that you stop watching porn, you stop masturbating, you go full abstinence, and you stick with that for, let's say, 90 days. And once you've reached that point where you say, okay, for the last 90 days, I've done nothing sexual, right? I've completely, again, I've basically removed that sexual stimulation component. I've given my brain a real chance to calm down and rewire, change priorities. And at that point, you can then kind of assess where you're at. Once you've been porn-free for that long, for example, learning how to masturbate without fantasizing can be a positive thing, can be a beneficial thing. And also at this point would be a good time to start going into the dating game and looking for a partner, because now you're not looking at anyone as a potential sex object anymore. And now maybe you're wondering, okay, does that mean I have to not have sex with my partner for 90 days? No, and I'll tell you why. It's because what I just described is an ideal case that almost nobody will actually do. Okay, the reality is that most people struggle massively when they try to quit porn. And even though it is better to quit porn and masturbation at the same time, for many guys it's easier to stay porn-free if they can still masturbate occasionally. So yes, maybe that's not 100% ideal, but it's better than always falling back to a full porn binge. So more realistically, you want to abstain from porn at all costs. You might still masturbate every once in a while. And then once you've been porn-free for long enough, then you maybe also want to quit masturbation for a while. And I'm explaining all this because we have to make a distinction between what's ideal and what's practical and realistic. Because yes, if you have a partner, look, maybe it would be good for your brain's healing process to just say just no sex or nothing sexual at all for 90 days. But realistically, that puts too much of a strain on most relationships. And also, it's not like 90 days is some kind of a magical number, right? Once you reach that, everything is okay. It's just that, certainly 1 week is not enough. A month is enough to start making some real progress. And then somewhere between 2 and 3 months in, you can say, okay, you've kind of solidly established these new habits. This is why I use 90 days as the milestone. But it would be a mistake to uphold that as a necessity to the point where it's a real problem in your relationship just because I said 90 days. So what does this mean for you in a relationship? If your current situation is that your relationship is already sexless, you're basically already never or almost never having sex, then you can apply essentially the same strategy because you don't have to worry about that, right? You want to cut out porn, you want to cut out masturbation, and you're not having sex anyway. And you give yourself the time to heal before you even start to worry about reintroducing sex. A lot of the stuff I'll be explaining later about how to build a stronger relationship and a better sex life while you do this still applies to you. But for this specific point, for the abstinence, it's no problem. You just remain abstinent and then you find a way to start rebuilding that sex life together with a partner. And you do this when you feel like you have properly overcome the addiction. Which again, this might be 2 months in, this might be 3 months in, this might take longer. But if you're in a relationship where you do have sex and there's also this expectation of sex and you suddenly stop having sex, that's not really an option, because then she will feel like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? And is he cheating on me or whatever? It's not good. You don't want to do that, certainly not without communicating about it. And we'll talk about that in just a moment as well. But the priority is the same for you. You need to get porn free. That's the number one thing. And the specific strategies for doing that are the same as for single guys. This is where I'll link to some other resources, right? You need to know your triggers. You need to change your environment. You need to have an if-then strategy that you apply when you get the urge. You need to do all the things that the single guys need to do in order to remove this habit and remove yourself, like cut porn out of your life. And you're going to experience withdrawals. It's going to be unpleasant. And you have to tough it out. When you do this, ideally, you should have a period of about 30 days where there's just nothing sexual going on in your life. So this is where not only do you not have sex with your partner, but also you don't want to have to be thinking about sex. You don't want to have to be thinking about your performance, your sexual hang-ups, all the stuff related. You don't want to be in a situation where this is something that's on your mind or weighing on you at all. For about 30 days, as you ride the crazy ups and downs of withdrawal, it's good to be in a position where it's just like, sex is just not a thing I have to think about or worry about at all. And to break that down even further, I would say that for about 2 weeks, there should be an opportunity for you to also just like distance yourself a little bit. You want to be in a situation where you know that, hey, even if I'm not cuddly and sensual and loving with my partner for a while, she won't worry about that and she knows what's going on. So that you really can like take this off your mind for a while. During the early period of withdrawing from porn, you also have to consider the flatline phenomenon, which is when your sex drive disappears, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But that's another reason why it's important that there's no pressure on you to be sexual or have sex during this time. Now, all of this doesn't mean that you can't like touch your partner anymore, or you can't cuddle or anything like that. You can still spend time together. You can still do a lot of even sensual and pleasurable things together. But the main thing is that the pressure is off, and you're not in a situation where you're not getting the fix from porn anymore, and now you're desperately trying to get the fix from your partner. So as we'll talk about later, there's a bunch of stuff you can do here that will actually improve your relationship and improve your sex life through this process. But before we get to that, we need to talk about communication. As you've probably already noticed, the stuff I'm talking about here only works if you communicate with your partner and she's on board with this process. You have to talk to your partner, explain the situation, explain that you are going to quit porn and that this is going to be difficult for a while, and you have to get her on your side. She has to be your ally in this process. Listen, the worst thing you can do is keep this a secret from your partner and be in a situation where you have to like pretend like everything's okay and nothing's happening while you're going through crazy withdrawal symptoms, which can include all kinds of stuff from mood swings to even just the struggling and the suffering you go through at times with crazy urges and stuff, right? All of this is going on and you somehow have to pretend like nothing's going on. That is a terrible situation to be in. So you have to communicate with your partner, explain to her what's going on, that you have this porn addiction, that you want to beat it. Explain to her that this is going to be difficult, like explain to her the challenges that are going to come up, and explain to her why you need to have this period of abstinence from sex. And by the way, one of the things you can do to make this whole thing easier is share this podcast episode with her. Now, I know that for some of you guys, this is really difficult, right? What I'm suggesting here will sound virtually impossible to do for some guys listening. And I gotta give it to you straight here. There is no viable alternative. You have to talk to your partner about this. If you have been keeping your porn addiction a secret from your partner, well, first of all, she probably knows, or she probably suspects that something's going on. And it's time to come clean about this. Now, the situation could also be worse. Maybe you're thinking, no, I can't tell her about this because she'll freak out. Maybe you've even had conflicts and fights in the past about this, where she's like, no, porn is cheating. You're cheating on me. And you're like, no, I'm not cheating, whatever. And you promise her, okay, I will never watch porn again. And you know that she thinks porn is cheating, or she thinks porn is the worst thing you could do, or whatever. And when you tell her about it, she's going to have a huge meltdown. And of course, that's something you want to avoid. But in many ways, keeping it a secret is kind of worse. Now, if this is the case, let me just also clarify something. Porn is not cheating. If anything, porn makes you less able to cheat. Porn wrecks your sex life and your ability to have good sex. It lowers your motivation and drive and ability to go out and meet someone else. It makes you generally a less attractive person and have lots of other content that explains these things in more detail. But basically, porn is so different from real sex that I don't think it's reasonable to say that porn is cheating. Like, if it were like real sex, it wouldn't be nearly as harmful. It wouldn't have all these terrible side effects if it were just like cheating. Where your partner's fears are warranted is that porn addiction over time can turn into sex addiction, which means that you can get so desperate to get your fix that porn itself doesn't do it anymore, and then you start going to prostitutes and stuff like that. That doesn't always happen, but it is possible. But in any case, if you're in this situation where you know that she will freak out if you come to her and say, hey, I have a porn addiction that I'm trying to overcome, listen, you need to rip off the Band-Aid, right? This is where you need to be courageous. And you need to live by your own values. Like, unless your values include, I want to be in a relationship where we're constantly lying to each other, then this is time to step up and have the courage to do the right thing. Ultimately, you're responsible for you and the decisions you make, and she's responsible for how she responds to it. And if none of that's the case, but you're just really scared and really ashamed because it's just not something you can see yourself talk about to your partner, once again, this is the time to be courageous. And often for men, the most difficult kind of courage to show is the one you need in order to be vulnerable and honest even when it's difficult and you admit a weakness. If this kind of shame and fear is the main reason why you're afraid to talk to your partner and you generally have a good relationship and good communication, it's very likely that she will react very positively to this, right? Women value honesty a lot in relationships. And she would generally rather have you be honest about something that's unpleasant than lie to her about it in order to pretend like everything's okay. Now, the last thing I'll say about this, ultimately this is your relationship, right? And it's your life. But my personal approach for this, or my personal thinking on this, is that I do not want to be in a relationship where I can't be completely honest with my partner and trust that she's going to be empathetic and that she's going to be on my side. If I'm in a relationship where I have to lie about certain things, where I have to like walk on eggshells, oh, I can't say this, I can't say that because otherwise she'll freak out. Or it's like, oh, I can't be vulnerable, I can't show weakness because otherwise, I don't know, she won't respect me anymore or something. That is a red flag. That means I have to get out of that relationship. So if I were in a situation where this is difficult, my responsibility is to live by my values and to respect myself. And then if she loses her mind about it and we have a huge fight and so on, then maybe I just need to leave that relationship and find someone who's more compatible with my values. So you need to have this conversation with your partner, and you need to make sure that you take your time to talk about it. Don't just say, hey, I have a porn addiction, I want to stop and we need to not have sex for a while. No, sit down, have a conversation, make sure she understands your situation, and make sure also to hear her out about what she feels about the whole thing. And if she's puzzled about this, if she's like, how can you possibly be addicted to porn, or what's wrong with you, or why don't you just stop, or something like that, right? As a woman, she doesn't understand how much of a drug porn is to men. Women don't respond nearly the same to the kind of visual stimulus of porn as men do. So if she's thinking, well, when I watch porn, this is how it feels, how could you possibly be addicted to that? That just means she can't see your perspective and she doesn't understand there's a serious difference going on here. If that's the case, also, you might just want to show her my content and be like, look, this is a real problem that actually, look, by my estimation, there's more than 1 billion men right now on Earth who are addicted to porn. This is not a rare thing. This is extremely common. This might be the world's most common addiction. There's certainly nothing wrong with you specifically that you're addicted to porn. And yes, it's very, very real and very severe. And if she doesn't understand that, help her understand that. Then agree on the plan, right? Agree on what you're going to do and get her to be your accountability partner and to support you in this. And this is where you have it a lot easier than single guys, because your partner can check in with you. She can hold you accountable. She can support you. She can help you through the tough times, right? When you're having withdrawal symptoms, she's someone who can be there, be with you through that and help you make it through. So you want to talk to your partner until that's the point where you arrive at, where you're like, okay, we're both clear about what we're doing here and we've agreed to support each other through the difficulties that we might encounter along the way. With that said, let's talk now about the flatline, because that is one of the difficulties you might encounter. The flatline is when your sex drive completely disappears. It doesn't happen to everyone who quits porn, but it's fairly common, so don't be surprised when it happens. This is when you literally lose all interest in anything sexual and you just have zero sex drive. You might notice that you wake up and you don't have morning wood anymore, you don't get spontaneous erections at anything anymore, you have zero desire to watch porn, you have zero desire to have sex with a person, you don't even want to like hold or kiss or anything, you're just completely uninterested in anything sexual. If this happens to you, both you and your partner need to know that this is normal. This is part of the healing process. And check out my video on the flatline that explains why this is part of the healing process. So don't panic. Really, the only thing you have to do is wait. The flatline is always temporary. It might last a few days. It'll probably last 1 or 2 weeks. It might last longer than that, but it's always temporary. And it's part of your brain and body healing. The worst thing you can do is panic about it and then try to have sex or try to watch porn again in order to like kickstart your system again. No, just wait. It resolves itself. In a relationship, during a flatline experience is a great moment to focus on all the non-sexual aspects of that relationship. This is a great opportunity to basically date your wife or your girlfriend again. Like just spend time together, get to know each other, do all the non-sexual things together, and also express your love and appreciation for everything about her that has nothing to do with sex. This is a great time to affirm your love for each other and let that part of the relationship grow. And this is one of those things where if you do it right, it can be really good for you and you look back at it and be like, I'm actually grateful this happened because look, it really brought us closer, it made our relationship better and stronger. But if you don't do it right, if you don't communicate, if you try to force it, it can be a total crisis. Next, let's talk about what you can do in this period to improve your sex life even as you're not having sex. What I'm talking about here comes later in the recovery process. Typically, the first 2 to 4 weeks will be messy, which is to say, you might experience a flatline like I just explained before. You might also experience mood swings during this time where one day you're super depressed, the next day you're super motivated, and it goes back and forth. You'll also experience differences in urges and desires. So you might have super strong urges to watch porn, like a burning need to watch porn, but no interest in sex at all. And then if you don't give your addict brain the porn it desires, maybe that like switches to you have a super strong desire for sex. Once that starts calming down a bit and you don't have like extreme swings and stuff anymore, pay attention to the desire for your partner and the desire for real sex returning. So as your brain heals and as stuff starts balancing out, you should feel kind of a normal, healthy desire to connect with your partner and have sex with your partner return in a way that you might have not felt in a very long time. Now, this is a good thing and it's a sign of healing, but do not act on it right away. My recommendation is that you don't go back to having sex with your partner as soon as you feel the desire to have sex with your partner, even if the choppy parts of withdrawal are already over. Instead, learn to feel that desire and enjoy the feeling of desiring her and start fanning the flames. So at this point in the recovery process, you can start expressing that desire in words without acting on it. And you can start playing with that and using your expressions of desire and your words primarily to also make her want you and fan the flames of her desire, get her excited, make her want to give herself to you. But then again, don't act on it. Instead, learn to enjoy these feelings of wanting and learn to create those feelings of wanting without the need to act. Now, here's a word of warning. This makes you kind of irresistible. Most women rarely experience this because it's more common that as soon as she expresses desire, the guy pounces on her because sex feels like a more scarce thing to men than it does to women in general. So if you can play with this, you're not only turning her on and giving her pleasurable sexual feelings, but you're also demonstrating self-control and self-mastery to a degree that you might have never seen before. And for many women, this is a huge turn on. But why do I give this advice? Apart from, okay, it could turn you into kind of a sex god, but there's another reason why I recommend you do this. I recommend that you don't have sex with your partner again until you're both really, really revved up for it. And here's why. Look, the bad scenario is that you feel some desire to have sex with your partner again and you go straight to having sex, but then it triggers some of that porn stuff. It brings back performance anxiety. You worry about your boner. You have to fantasize about porn in order to get off. And it's kind of frustrating and it makes things worse. It basically sets you back. The good scenario, the one that I hope you will experience, is that you hold off. You grow that desire for each other, but you hold off until both of you are basically attacking each other like horny teenagers. And you're just so into the whole experience that it doesn't even occur to you to worry about your boner or fantasize about porn. You're just so into it because you've built up so much desire, which then creates a really positive new experience, and it gives you forward momentum. You're like, wow, this is how good real sex can be. And it helps that brain rewiring away from desiring porn and using porn to get off and towards, oh, I can actually get all this pleasure from sex and it's actually much better. Ideally, you can give yourself that experience that really makes your whole nervous system change priorities to be like, oh, this is what we need more of. And simply teasing and denying for a bit, holding off for long enough, makes it easier to have that really positive sexual experience. If a problem that you have had in your sex life is one of a confidence issue and performance anxiety and stuff like that, so you tend to worry about whether you're a good enough lover or you're too focused on your performance to be able to fully enjoy the sex you're having, then this practice of ramping up the desire can be extremely good for you. One of the things you can do here is you can learn how to make your woman feel great and give her a lot of pleasure in non-sexual ways that are completely separate, like from your sexual performance. So for example, if you don't yet have the ability to give your partner a really good massage, this is a good time to learn that. Most people absolutely suck at giving massages. Most people have never learned how to do this, never learned really to develop that skill of, touching in different ways with different levels of intensity and having a sense of how that feels, from anywhere from a light touch that can be really sensual to a really strong touch that can give you like this kind of good pain and relief. So learning how to give a massage is a great way to learn how you can be sensual and physical and make her feel great, and to learn and gain confidence, like your ability to touch her and feeling like you know what you're doing and you're in control. And at the same time, you don't have to worry, right? You're not in the situation where it's like, oh, but what if I lose my boner or something like that? Learning to give a massage is just one example and one that I recommend. But the basic idea behind it is that you become much more confident in your ability to make her feel great, even before the pants come off. And this kind of confidence takes your mind off of the performance anxiety and will make it easier for you to have sex again and enjoy sex once you get there. This whole process of healing from porn addiction and rediscovering real sex with your partner is also a great opportunity to discover your real desires. Porn warps your perception of sex. Porn leads to an escalation. Porn users generally watch more and more extreme stuff over time. And it's surprisingly common for people to end up watching stuff that isn't actually aligned with their real sexual interests. You just need a more and more extreme hit. You end up watching stuff that's kind of weird or gross or not aligned with your actual sexual orientation or something like that. This is very common. Of course, nobody wants to talk about that because that's the really shameful part of porn addiction. But if that's happening to you, trust me, you're not alone. When you heal from porn, when you're abstinent for long enough, you will find your preferences change. And it could be that there's some, fetish stuff or some of the more extreme stuff just isn't appealing to you anymore. And that's great. That's a great sign of healing. But don't expect that, all you'll want afterwards is just the most normal vanilla sex. It is completely normal and human to have kinky desires and to find it titillating to break taboos and stuff like that. That is not a flaw, and it's not something that's just caused by porn. But you have to give your brain that break from all this porn to start discovering, what are my real desires? What are the things that I actually want and desire that actually turn me on if I'm not constantly overstimulated by porn? This is an important opportunity to improve your sex life. And it also requires communication. And it's important to do this. It's important to communicate with your partner about your real desires, especially the ones that have gone unfulfilled in your sex life so far. And that's because unfulfilled desires, things that you're ashamed to ask your partner for, you just don't talk about, things that you feel you can't do with your partner but you want to do, that's one of the things that sends guys to porn. So you have these unfulfilled desires. You feel like I can't experience these things that I really want to experience with my relationship, and I can go to porn and there I can experience it. Or even I'm afraid of talking to my partner about this because I'm afraid that she'll reject me or something like that. Well, I can go to porn where I will never be rejected, where I'm quote unquote safe. So this is where I recommend that you make this part of your healing process in the first few months, and maybe months 2, 3, 4 of overcoming porn addiction. You start talking to your partner about your desires. and you start sharing with vulnerability. So you might say, look, I'm kind of ashamed to admit this, but I'd really like to try XYZ. It is really helpful for a relationship to establish the rule that this is something that you can honestly express, where your desires, even your kinky desires, are welcome. And if your partner is not into it, that's fine. It's fine to just share what's on your mind, share what you're curious about, and find the overlap. Like, this isn't about getting every single fantasy you've ever had fulfilled. It's just about creating a relationship in which more of your desires get fulfilled and in which you feel safe to express those desires. If you've not experienced this before, here's what's probably going to happen. When you start vulnerably sharing some of your fantasies and desires, she will start sharing some of hers, and some of them might be quite shocking. Here, it's important that both of you can be open and non-judgmental. That you, even if she says something, she reveals something where you're like, oh my God, what? That you accept, okay, this is a fantasy you've had. Let's talk about it. I accept that. Even if maybe you go, look, I don't want to do this, or I'm not comfortable with this, but you can communicate it, and you don't judge her, you don't condemn her, you don't shame her, and you build that style of communication with each other where you can be totally open and vulnerable. And then you'll probably find quite a lot of overlap of stuff that both of you have been thinking about and would like to try, but you've never tried. So again, it's just really useful to have this in your relationship, not only because it will make your sex life more pleasurable, but also because it gives you one less reason to want to go back to porn. Another recommendation here is to try and learn how to play. Because, okay, porn addiction is serious and you've probably suffered serious consequences, but we can't bring that serious attitude into everything sexual. Okay, a lot of sex stuff is kind of silly and very playful. And there are certain desires and certain forms of sexual play that really only work if you're playing. As an example, a pretty common example is that people will have some form of fantasies about power play, right? It's like, oh, I want to be dominated, or I want to dominate you. If you are too serious about that, it's like, oh my God, but she wants to be dominated. But also, what about feminism, right? I'm supposed to be a strong, independent woman. Or you want to be dominated, and you're like, oh, but I'm supposed to be a man, and men don't do that. It's like, if you're too serious about it, it's not going to work. But if you can just say, hey, this might be fun to try out. This might be, let's just, play with this. And we're both playing a role while we're doing this. And then afterwards, we've had a lot of fun and we go, oh, wow, that was cool. And then you go on with your life, right? If you can create that frame of playfulness and play, it will help you get more of your desires fulfilled, which again is a huge part of resolving the quote-unquote need for porn. All right, finally, let's talk about a timeline. People always ask me about a timeline, right? How long is this going to take? When is what going to happen? Look, ultimately, you do have to be able to play this by ear because it's different for everyone. So I'm going to give you an example timeline just so you have something to orient yourself by. But also, there's many important caveats that I'll mention afterwards. So an example, just to sort all of the stuff I've talked about into a timeline, it would be like the first 2 weeks you quit, and the first 2 weeks just nothing sexual whatsoever. This is your total abstinence period. Then in week 3, this is a good time to start dating your wife or girlfriend, get to know each other, spend more time together, more cuddling, but nothing sexual. Weeks 4 and 5 is where you would do the fanning the flames of desire, learn to sit with that desire, learn to cultivate it, get really, really turned on. And then at some point at the end of that is when you actually start having sex again. And then in weeks, let's say 6 to 12 is when you would start having sex again, maybe on a regular basis, but not very often, basically less often than you want to. So you want to keep playing that game of fanning the flames of desire, of ramping up the desire and not always giving into the impulse right away. That's really going to help you. And then at that point, 12 weeks in, like several months in, hopefully then you would be in a situation where you say, hey, I haven't even thought about porn for weeks now. This problem is resolved. We can basically go on with our lives. We don't have to focus on this anymore. But listen, this is kind of an ideal, and recovery is never a straight line. It's pretty unlikely that you'll just quit porn and then that's how it goes without any conflict, without any relapses, nothing, right? It's probably not going to be like that. You have to play it by ear. If you go through a really long flatline period, you have to work that out with your partner. If you relapse several times because your urges are so strong, you have to work that out with your partner. And you have to be in this together. And once again, I have to say, if you do this right, this can be a massive opportunity. Because yes, there will be difficult times. You will struggle. There will be challenges in this relationship. But these kinds of challenges make you stronger. They can bring you closer together. And you can say, look, if I follow this kind of process, and also watch my other content to learn more about this, if I follow this kind of process, I will come out of this a better man than I ever was before. And this relationship will be a stronger relationship, better relationship than it ever was before. So it's worth going through the struggles to get to that end result. So go through it together, have each other's backs, and this will make everything better. Those are my recommendations for how to quit porn if you're currently in a relationship. If you have any other questions about this, you can leave a comment with your question on the YouTube channel. You can also go to anchor.fm/QbH. That's anchor.fm/QbH for Quit by Healing. And you can click the message button there to send me a voice message. Any questions, any messages that come in will be fully anonymous, so don't worry about that. But when you get in touch like that, that gives me an opportunity to address questions specifically. Also, check out the link in the description, which takes you to my Discord community. So if you're a guy who wants to quit porn and you want to get some community support and you want to be able to ask me questions and get replies, that is the best place to join. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.